The British invasion of Ireland in 1940. It is June 1940, and the British Empire faces its first existential threat in centuries. Through sheer aggressiveness, Nazi Germany had forced Poland, Denmark, the Low Countries, Norway, and even France to capitulate. The British Isles stood now alone and open to an invasion. If this was not enough, the two islands, Great Britain and Ireland, were divided for the first time in more than 800 years, and the anti-British sentiment of the Irish people was on the rise. Some members of the Irish Republican Army were even plotting with Hitler. As Irish neutrality threatened the existence of the United Kingdom and its empire, the new British Prime Minister Winston Churchill saw no alternative but to start preparing plans for an invasion. Today in history, we explore the scenarios of a war that, in the end, never materialized. What would have happened if Britain had attacked Ireland in 1940? Welcome to Histri, your source for alternate history entertainment. The exploration of likely events from the past and their effects on the world. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. British-Irish relations before the war. After a turbulent period of conflict and a war of independence that lasted for 2.5 years, the Free Irish State was at last declared in 1922. But independence after almost a millennium of British rule did not come without complications. First of all, the island of Ireland was partitioned between the newly founded Irish state and Northern Ireland, which remained part of the United Kingdom. Secondly, the British retained 3 ports, Bearhaven, Spike Island, and Lough Swilly, as bases for its Royal Navy that were deemed indispensable by the then Secretary of State for the Colonies, Winston Churchill. Thirdly, Ireland remained a member of the British Commonwealth. Britain thus pushed to retain an advantageous position on the island. Ireland acted accordingly. In its 1922 constitution, its national territory was claimed to be the whole island of Ireland. It was then, from the very beginning, that the relationship between the two states were problematic. This escalated even further in 1932, when the new leader of Ireland, Eamon de Valera, refused to pay the land annuities arising from earlier British loans. In retaliation, London hit back with special duties on Irish imports, thus beginning a period of economic war that lasted until 1938, when a trade agreement was signed. The agreement resolved the financial dispute and also gave back to Ireland the 3 naval bases. The Irish government had every reason to be happy. For Churchill, who at the time held no position in the government, this was a feckless act, and a major injury to British national life and safety that would cause great stress and despair during the war. This was proven true when on 3 September 1939, Eamon de Valera declared the neutrality of his country to the war that Britain declared on Germany on the same day. Britain's position in the Atlantic was severely compromised, while its left flank remained dangerously insecure in the face of an impending German invasion. And this was not the only reason for the British to feel afraid. IRA and the Irish Nazi sympathies. The 1922 establishment of Erie was not the end of the conflict for the Irish, who had to endure a civil war for another year. The reason was the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921, which some of the Republic's fighters found unworthy of their struggle. Although the anti-treaty IRA was defeated, its political influence persisted throughout the period until the Second World War. Their major demand was the complete expulsion of the British from Ireland. However, the end of the partition was resisted not only by the British, but also by the government of Northern Ireland, which had no desire to give up its power over the 6 Irish countries. In their effort to undermine this resistance and secure their goal, the IRA turned its eyes to a dangerous potential ally, Nazi Germany. When Sean Russell became IRA's chief of staff in April 1938, the situation in Europe was already tense. Almost simultaneously, the Anglo-Irish Trade Agreement was signed, bringing the economic war between the two sides to an end. the IRA decided it was time to act. In a coordinated effort between their organizations in Ireland and Northern Ireland, they declared themselves the legitimate government of a united Ireland and set in motion the S Plan, a bombing and sabotage campaign against Britain that Russell had been planning for months. In January 1939, the IRA declared war on the United Kingdom, and Russell began seeking financial and political help from other countries. He found receptive ears in Germany, and in February 1939 came into contact with German intelligence agent Oscar Faust. In May 1940, after visiting the United States, Russell arrived in Berlin. There, the IRA and the German intelligence service agreed on the conduct of Operation Dove, a military operation aimed at coordinating IRA sabotage efforts with German military objectives to destabilize Britain and aid a potential German invasion. Russell successfully landed in Dublin on the 16th of August, 1940, with the German U-boat U-65. He was welcomed with excitement by other members of the IRA, but also by other personalities like Dan Breen, a politician who became notorious for his Axis sympathies, and, most importantly, Joseph Walshin, the Irish Permanent Secretary of the Department of External Affairs. Walshin took a cold-blooded view of Nazi policies and saw an advantage for the Irish state in a victory for the Axis powers, which could deliver an end to partition. It was a view shared by many. The June Crisis. While the S Plan and Operation Dove were quickly unfolding, undermining the British position in the war and on Ireland, the IRA in May 1940 called on the people of Ireland to resist conscription to the British Army. Notably, many volunteers from Ireland were eager to participate in the British war effort, seeing their interests aligned with their former overlords. Indeed, there were discussions of joint operations between the British Empire and Ireland, coded Plan W, mainly focusing on the event of a German invasion against the Republic. By the end of May, as the British realized their defensive plans in France had resulted in disaster, they hurried to coordinate their response with Ireland. Winston Churchill, newly appointed as Prime Minister and well known for his criticism of the Anglo-Irish Trade Agreement and the return of the treaty ports to Ireland, pressed the Irish government towards a compromise. Some reports from Ireland were alarming and added to British agony and defeatism. The border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland was hard to control, and fears of enemies under German influence infiltrating Britain to act as a fifth column exacerbated tensions. Ulster Unionists in Northern Ireland were constantly warning the British cabinet of such moves, fostering a hostile environment of distrust. So when Malcolm MacDonald, the health minister in Churchill's government, was sent 3 times from 17 through 27 June to negotiate with the Irish government a reliable plan that would ensure British security, all eyes were turned to Dublin. In the meantime, British intelligence services were ignited by urgency. In cooperation with their U.S. colleagues, they uncovered Sean Russell's secret journey from the United States to Genoa and then to Berlin. Following the traces, they also unveiled the details of Operation Dove and realized it could spark a dangerous uprising in Ireland, supported by the world's largest war machine. But this was far from the worst. According to information by Lord Craigavon, the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, the Irish Prime Minister de Valera was already also under German dictation and had been informed about the operation. Acting as a middleman who connected the IRA with the Irish government was Adolf Marr, an Austrian Nazi who served as director of the National Museum of Ireland. Since 1934, Marr had been actively promoting German-Irish cooperation and quickly realized Germany's interest in a united Ireland to counterbalance British dominance. Following instructions from Wilhelm Canaris, Marr persuaded Eamon de Valera to allow Russell's covert entry into the war effort and to utilize the IRA as a paramilitary group for a potential invasion of Northern Ireland as part of Ireland's small military forces. Upon learning this, Churchill decided to abandon the negotiations on 27 June 1940, accusing de Valera of betraying the Commonwealth. De Valera attempted to mitigate these accusations by pushing legislation purportedly aimed at toughening his stance against the IRA. But the British remained unconvinced. Craigavon followed up his previous warning with a memorandum to Churchill that called for an immediate seizure of the vital treaty ports, followed by a full-scale invasion and occupation of Ireland, suggesting the appointment of a military governor, preferably of Scottish or Welsh descent. Churchill was at first reluctant, but the evidence of the Irish anti-British stance was overwhelming. On 30 June 1940, he ordered General Montgomery to assemble troops on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. At 6:25 in the morning, war was declared, and the first British troops entered Irish soil just 19 years after being forced to withdraw. The invasion, an easy victory? At the time of the invasion, the Irish army was still ill-prepared. In September 1939, de Valera announced the establishment of the Emergency Army, intended to reach a strength of around 50,000 men, a goal that was never achieved. In fact, the Irish Army had only 30,000 active personnel at the time of the British attack, along with a few hundred serving in the Air Corps, and just 2 ships to defend its coasts and territorial waters. The state had also tried to organize a local defense force, an auxiliary unit that could potentially mobilize up to 180,000 people. But most of them were unarmed, and their duties were just surveillance and observation, not combat. Against this unorganized force, there stood the mighty army of the British Empire. Although recently defeated in France, the British had successfully evacuated around 200,000 men from Dunkirk. Starting in May 1940, the British government ordered the creation of a Home Guard of around 1.5 million men to defend the British Isles from a German invasion. Large armies were also in Egypt, India, and Indochina. The British Navy was still one of the world's largest, and the Royal Air Force was one of the most formidable. But there was one problem. The army was overstretched and busy defending against the Germans. To attack and later occupy a hostile Ireland, forces were needed on the ground that were also needed to defend the home coasts. Speed and determination were therefore vital if the operation was to succeed. In what is now remembered as the British version of the Blitzkrieg, General Alexander's 1st Infantry Division, a well-armed force of 20,000, struck first. The 1st and 2nd Infantry Brigades, supported by bombers and air fighters, captured Drogheda, posing a significant threat to Dublin. Simultaneously, the rest of the army, bolstered by the Royal Ulster Constabulary and a local Home Guard contingent numbering around 20,000, moved westward and seized the strategic port of Louisville, promptly secured by the British fleet. Meanwhile, the 3rd Infantry Division under General Montgomery embarked on transport ships with the objective of capturing the other 2 treaty ports, Caux and the city of Cork, essential for its control, as well as Berehaven. The first part was successful. After a surprise landing and some fierce but brief battles, the city of Cork fell on 15 July. As the British Navy was moving towards its last target, Berehaven, jubilation swept through London while a severe crisis gripped de Valera in Dublin. However, events were soon to take a turn. The plan backfires. Signs of trouble emerged soon after the capture of Cork and Drogheda. As the 1st Division was trying to establish a line along the River Boyne to sever Dublin from the north, local resistance intensified. Memories of the War of Independence awakened, and guerrilla organizations started appearing in the rear of the British Army. On the valleys of the Boyne and Blackwater rivers, the crossings were covered by machine gun positions which prevented the British from reaching strategically significant posts, exposing them to attacks from both organized and unorganized forces. Home Guard divisions from Wales and Scotland that started arriving during the last days of July bolstered security but raised concerns about potential vulnerability to a German counterattack in their own regions. With Dublin thus effectively defended, the British focus shifted to capturing Berehaven as their primary objective. Under normal circumstances, this southeastern port would have been an easy target for the British Navy. The local defense force and a few mobile units like motorcycle troops and cavalry were insufficient to withstand an organized British division, led by one of the Army's most skilled generals. But rebellions and resistance in Cork forced the entire division to remain in the city, delaying further advances. This setback marked a turning point in the conflict. On 16 August, Sean Russell landed in Dublin and was welcomed by thousands of anti-British protesters, urging De Valera for a policy of reconciliation with the IRA. In a historic meeting at Stewart's Lodge, the two political adversaries agreed to a common strategy against the British invasion that would make use of the IRA's extensive network on both sides of the Irish border, alongside a government rally of troops to strengthen Ireland's defenses. Now, the time was ripe for the final trump card: the Nazis. The German Luftwaffe had started attacking Britain on the 10th of July. The attacks intensified on 15 August at the same time that the situation in Ireland was escalating. Operation Sea Lion, the German plan to cross the Channel and land on British soil, was being prepared through a fierce air and naval battle. But it was soon proven that apart from threatening cities like Plymouth and Dover, the German Air Force could not seriously threaten London, nor could it organize a planned invasion of the English coast heavily guarded by the British Navy, the Royal Air Force, and the ever-growing Home Guard. The German eyes then turned to the west and the port city of Berehaven still resisting. It was a perfect chance for them to activate Operation Green, a plan complementary to Sea Lion that would achieve a similar landing in Ireland. The British were expecting such a move and had already planned a response, codenamed Plan W, that foresaw joint operations of Ireland and the UK in case of a German invasion. For this to have any chance, of course, a friendly government in Dublin was needed, and the fall of Berehaven would almost certainly force De Valera's resignation and an Irish capitulation. It was therefore now a race between the English and the Germans to secure the control of this strategic Irish port. It was also at that crucial time on 24 August 1940 that the German battleship Bismarck, larger than any ship the British had at the time, was commissioned for sea trials. The question on everybody's lips was, will the Germans strike before the Irish defense collapses? Meanwhile, Britain's reputation was deteriorating. The U.S. government carefully addressed the issue of Irish independence and its right to neutrality, calling on British forces to respect the local population and not push beyond the three ports that were essential in the war against Germany. The governments of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand similarly urged caution and warned that violation of Commonwealth members' neutrality could force them to reconsider their stance in the war. As expected, the most severe reaction came from India. The Indian National Congress and its leader Gandhi accused the British of imperial arrogance and called for the immediate withdrawal of their forces, not only from Ireland, but also from Northern Ireland. This demand was accompanied by a parallel call for British forces to withdraw from India. The end of the war. Under pressure from all sides and still unable to capture Berehaven, Churchill's government decided to call for negotiations. General Smuts, Prime Minister of South Africa, arrived in Belfast on 15 September to mediate an agreement between the two sides. A temporary ceasefire was agreed upon and negotiations lasted for over a month, while the Battle of the Atlantic raged on. The British press accused the Irish government of stalling the negotiations, hoping for a German breakthrough in the naval and air battles. Meanwhile, the Irish government and the IRA accused the British of unlawfully using Irish ports during the war, violating their neutrality, and risking pushing them into a conflict that was not theirs to fight. Despite the toxicity, however, Churchill and De Valera finally agreed to peace. Britain would withdraw all its forces from Southern Ireland and respect Irish neutrality. In return, Ireland agreed to a favorable neutrality toward the British, allowing the passage of air and naval units from specific positions close to the Irish borders that were deemed vital for Britain's strategic interests. In a secret agreement, cooperation between British and Irish intelligence services was also established. The treaty was signed on 29 September 1940. 2 weeks earlier, Hitler had ordered the indefinite postponement of Operation Sea Lion. Any chance of collaboration between the Germans and Irish is now dead and buried. The War and Peace Treaty between Britain and Ireland did not actually happen, but the preconditions for it were present. Tensions between the two sides, Irish Nazi sympathies, Sean Russell's visit to Berlin, and detailed plans for invasions of Ireland by both the British and the Germans existed. There is little reason to doubt that if a German invasion and occupation of Ireland happened, Irish ultranationalists would welcome it. Pro-fascist organizations such as the Ultranationalite, the Architects of the Resurrection, did exist and were active during the war. Had Sean Russell not died at sea, the course of history could indeed have been different, following the storyline suggested here. It is also faithful to the facts that Irish neutrality was favorable to the British and that the two intelligence services did cooperate during the war against the Germans, even without fighting this fictional war. After 1945, it was estimated that 368 ships and 5,070 crew members had been lost due to Irish neutrality and the refusal to allow Britain to use Irish ports for convoy protection. A sad historical detail. However, a British invasion of Ireland would have resulted in far worse consequences, with thousands of casualties on both sides. In this sense, Winston Churchill's remark on Ireland in his speech celebrating the Allied victory in Europe on 13 May 1945 contains both truth and exaggeration, as he said, "We never laid a violent hand upon them, which at times would have been quite easy and quite natural, and left the De Valera government to frolic with the German and later with the Japanese representatives to their heart's content." Thank you for watching. Let us know your thoughts, questions, or ideas for future videos in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to never miss any content from Histri, your ultimate source for alternate history entertainment.